Yeah. Adam Smith, you're supposed to always make sure my hair's clear.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, can you hear us? Microphone.
Yes, Madam Chair, we aren't getting any sound from the committee room, so we haven't heard anything so far. Yeah, it seems like you're muted at least.
S is having problems with committee assistance and providing any assistance outside of answering telephones in offices right now. Can you hear us now? All right.
Yes, Madam Chair, we can. I don't know if you had done anything in the meeting prior to now, but if you did, you might repeat those for the interests of open meetings and public access.
And here I was going to say, not even ask you if you heard us on any RS number, Scott. And here you blow it. That's right. All right.
That's right.
That's fine. We have Representative Epley has one, and then we have one other one, Scott. Go ahead, Representative Epley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So second time around, and Scott, it's not like a big surprise to you, but it's RS 210809. It's an EMS bill that was brought to me by the EMS board for medical directors of those said EMS boards to have oversight of their protocols.
And that was brought to us by the EMS board, I believe you said.
I did.
Thank
yes.
you. You got it, Scott? All right. The next one we have is Tara with the Hospital Association.
Hi, Madam Chair. Appear before you on behalf of the Kansas Hospital Association. I am Tara Mays. I would like to request the bill introduction of RS 0751, establishing rural emergency hospitals as a rural healthcare licensure category and enacting the Rural Emergency Hospital Act.
You have it, Scott? All right. Thank you. And there were no other bill introductions. The only other step that we had taken was I let committee members know that they should have been emailed a copy of the committee rules, and we were about to ask if there was any questions or comments on the rules. All right, seeing none, that's the way I like to operate.
Yes, ma'am. I don't mind a bit.
All right, committee, we're going to have, we have a group of folks here today that we have to present and update to the legislature the K-12 mental health pilot program that we've successfully had in our schools. I believe this is actually year 4 on it. And so we're going to have some of our CMHCs, Department of Education, as well as some of our school districts that are participants in this to tag team. We will start out, somebody's got their microphone on. Please make sure that you're muted so we don't get any background noise. And so the first person that we have up with us today will be Kyle Kessler with the Community Mental Health Association, and he'll present along back and forth maybe a little bit with Craig Newswinder with the Department of Education. Welcome to committee. Can you hear me?
I can, Madam Chairwoman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I am Kyle Kessler, Executive Director at the Association of Community Mental Health Centers of Kansas. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we represent all licensed 26 community mental health centers around the state. So whether you're in Liberal, Kansas or Leawood, Kansas, you should have access to community mental health center services. And we appreciate the opportunity to appear here this afternoon to present on the School Mental Health Intervention Program. It's got a few different names. School Mental Health Pilot's another one. And as the chairwoman said, this was started about 4 years ago in the 2018 legislative session with a proviso that enjoyed a wide array of bipartisan support. So I think that helped us develop the nuts and bolts of the program and have conversations across the state. And it was started in 6 community mental health centers with 9 school districts, and has grown to 56 school districts and 17 community mental health centers. And you'll hear something from rural frontier parts of the state, just like the urban parts of the state this afternoon. I might make a couple additional comments, but as I was looking at the roster of conferees for this afternoon and seeing all of the current and former clinical staff, medical staff, and educators, I realized that of the 10 of us, I was the only one without any real marketable skills. So I just might make a couple comments and then defer to the rest who have the expertise that they've developed at the local level. But simply stated, this program helps teachers to focus on teaching and helps connect behavioral health providers with families and kids who might need services and treatment. And this can be done year-round and on weekends rather than just during school hours. And so I think it has created a fantastic connection in that regard. The other piece that I would mention is the data and the system that has been developed at the State Department of Education has been extremely helpful in measuring outcomes and the successes and improvements that have been made. And they will talk more about that. I would tell you that the data is compelling, but the stories and experiences are nothing less than inspiring. From numerous interventions with students who had suicidal ideation to students who had a plan and date for attempting suicide but received life-saving intervention, to reports of abuse or neglect or youth in foster care that resulted in the need for a change in placements. This was something that is not just improving lives but saving them. I would add that the program was not uncomplicated in its development. I think that the work that was done with the memorandums of understanding on things like HIPAA, which is the healthcare privacy legislation, and FERPA, which is the educational privacy piece, the memorandums of understanding and access to appropriate information that was done, I think has been a win right there. So we've learned a lot by working together, and I will conclude my comments there, but stand for questions at the appropriate time after everyone has spoken, if that's all right, Madam Chair.
That'd be fine. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are you out there, Craig?
I am here.
All right. Welcome to committee.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee members. I won't add a whole lot to what Kyle said. He talked about the fact we started with 9 districts. We added 23 the next year, and 24 are brand new this year. So the program's been able to grow as we've moved along pretty significantly. And I know we had some complications getting some information to the committee, Madam Chair. You might, if you did not receive from us a couple of documents, one that lists all the districts and they're color coded so you can tell who was a pilot, who came in year 2 and who's here in year 3, along with the dollar amounts that were provided. The way the program works, districts apply. There's a process they go through to apply to the State Department of Education. The state board approves those applications, and we then provide, the legislature provides state aid of 75% of a school liaison's salary. And the liaison's purpose is very similar to what it sounds like. They make the arrangements between the student, the family, the school, and the mental health center, and keep things coordinated in that fashion. And the legislature pays 75% of that salary, and then the additional 25% of that expense is sent to the school districts as payment to the community mental health center for the services that they're providing. The other document that you will receive, if you don't have already, is a report that the school districts file twice a year with us. And so you have the most recent report, which would cover July 1 of 2020 through December 20th of 2020. And it just tells you by district how many were referred for services, what was the total number of students served, and then in selected areas that were identified early to start with, what kind of improvement have we seen per student in the student population that's being served. And one thing I would clarify on that, for instance, state total, you'll see improved attendance of 1,086 students. If there's a student in the program for whom attendance is not a problem, we don't look at them, schools don't look at them and don't count them as improved in attendance or not. If they're already improving well, then we're going to work on other areas if that's never been an issue. So 1,086 students improving is not 1,086 out of the total that are participating in the program. It's only out of those who have had some issues with attendance in the past. And that's a brief look at the nuts and bolts, which is kind of our side of the issue. The other thing I would add, I would echo what Kyle said. It was not particularly a simple program to get up and running. There's a number of agencies involved, as well as the legislature. But I think I can safely say, without fear of being contradicted by Kyle or Madam Chair, by yourself, since you've been involved from the beginning, the partnership on this program has just been fantastic. It has really served well CMHCs, school districts, and most importantly, the kids in the schools. And with that, I'll be quiet because you have more interesting people to hear from than me.
Well, we think you're pretty interesting, and I always enjoy seeing that report when it comes out. So, and we'll get back to that at the end of our discussion. Next up, I have Randy Kallstrom. I hope I did not mispronounce that. Are you there, Randy?
Yes, I am, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
I can. And then behind you, I believe we're going to have Angela Dunn, which is one of your schools that you serve. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
All right, go ahead. Welcome to committee, Randy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Again, I am Randy Kallstrom. I am the CEO for Wyandotte Behavioral Health Network in Kansas City, Kansas, Wyandotte County. We, along with the USD 500, were one of the original 6 pilot sites. And we've had a long-standing collaborative relationship with the Kansas City, Kansas School District, including having mental health providers embedded in a special education program for children with severe emotional disorders. However, the general population, oftentimes, who may have benefited from mental health treatment, were not recognized and referred for services simply because teachers and faculty administration did not have time to focus on the mental health needs of the students. The addition of the mental health liaisons have created a concerted focus to identify and refer students who are in need, not because they're coming to the attention of the vice principal because of their behavioral problems, but a variety and a continuum of mental health needs, which has led to greater access to health care for these students. The addition of a school-based therapist has also increased the access to care by offering risk and intake assessments in the school or in the client's home, breaking down barriers for families such as transportation and time constraints due to work or other obligations that they may have. And by offering the services in the school, students who may have missed school due to their mental health challenges, particularly during a crisis, have increased supports and therapeutic intervention to help them remain in school successfully. The School and Mental Health Partnership has also created training opportunities for teachers on trauma-informed strategies for managing students with mental health needs, supporting students through this year's pandemic, and also how to help teachers and other school staff with their own self-care, particularly during this last year. During this last year, obviously, with the pandemic, it's posed all sorts of challenges, and the Kansas City School District has been remote for the most part. But yet, from August through December, we have served 229 students from the USD 500 from the 13 pilot sites through this program. Give you a couple success stories. One of the mental health liaisons worked to set up a Zoom room for students who were attending in person. And one particular middle school student frequented the counselor's office last year due to suicidal ideation. This year, the liaison and our therapist were able to provide services either directly outside on warmer days or in the Zoom rooms So the child was able to speak with the crisis clinician at the time when they might have had intrusive thoughts of suicide during the school day, which allowed them to remain in school and mitigated their risk for crisis. Also, a high school student who was partially homeless at times, precariously housed at best, was working with the mental health liaison from the school district, working with our staff and our case manager to help them keep housed. But during that time when they were homeless, being able to provide those services in the school, keep them connected not only to the school, but also to the mental health services and continuing to receive those services. Also, this last year, in partnership between our staff and the school liaisons, we were able to launch a parent support group through Zoom, not just to the families who are engaged in services, but also to any of the families who are having children in the school district. So in summary, the program has really boosted our partnership with the school district. It's increased access to healthcare for students and provided great opportunities for collaboration now, but also relationships for collaboration down the road. And with that, I would stand for questions now or later. Otherwise, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today.
Thank you, Randy. We're going to take questions after we get through each of our presentations. Next, I have Angela Dunn with the Kck School District.
Good
Welcome
afternoon,
to the committee,
Madam.
Angela.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and distinguished committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to share some updates with you today. Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools is in their third year of receiving funding and participating in this program. We started with 14 positions in our first year and then grew 2 positions each additional year afterwards, with 18 positions in our school district funded by this program this year. At the same time, our Board of Education has funded some additional positions so that we have at least 1, if not 2, master's level social workers in each of our schools. As
Angela,
Mr. Call, yes,
Angela,
ma'am.
I'm going to interrupt you just a moment, because when you talk about those new positions, that means 18 buildings in your district.
18 behavioral health liaisons in
Right.
14 of our buildings.
All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So some of our high schools have more than 1 position due to the size. As Mr. Kallstrom stated, the collaboration between USD 500 and PACES has been strong long before this program started. However, with the increased funding and positions, it has greatly improved access to services, with therapy being on site during school, and certainly the creativity of the liaisons and the mental health providers during this remote time. District-wide, Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools have completed over 1,100 suicide assessments in the last 3 years. So as was stated by Mr. Kessler earlier, this program is definitely saving lives. Most recently, there was a high school student that was really struggling with attendance, incredibly depressed, not getting out of bed, not logging into Zoom, and reached out to the social worker at their school for some support. She was very worried about suicidal ideation and quickly contacted the crisis clinic at PACES, who was able to intervene and do a crisis assessment to get that student somewhere where they could be safe. The CMHC providers and the school social workers have had to be incredibly flexible and pivot and have creative ways as we've accommodated COVID-19 restrictions. And it's been a great partnership to develop different ways to get students involved. And this strong partnership, as Mr. Kallstrom stated, is offering now a parent support group for parents of clients who are participating in PACES services, but also the community. Just, our close relationship had them recognize that there is a big need, and there might be parents in the community that are struggling that need that support. We had a student elementary school who has been struggling with behaviors for years. The social worker has repeatedly tried to engage and get the parent involved, but she's been resistant to services for a variety of reasons, barriers, stigma, But this year, because of that relationship over the last couple years, she was able to connect the parent with the therapist from the Community Mental Health Center, and that student is now receiving services. Their attendance has improved, their grades have improved, and most importantly for mom, since the student has been learning virtually, the student's behaviors have improved. So I have so many wonderful examples just like that, but I know that my colleagues in other school districts have some things to share too. So I'll pause and I look forward to answering any questions at the end.
Good. Thank you, Angela. Next, we have Carrie Nation with Horizons CMHC. Welcome to committee, Carrie. Are you there, Carrie?
I've got to unmute, I guess. I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Oh, all right. Yes, we hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Carrie Nation, and I'm a clinical social worker at Horizons Mental Health Center. I have been here 20 years, and I'm currently the director of our satellite offices, so we're pretty rural. Those satellite offices are in Pratt, Harper, Kingman, and Barber counties. And Barber County is still considered a frontier county. So we've got a little bit different population. But today I'm speaking mostly about our relationship with Skyline Schools, which is a school located west of Pratt. This is our second year working with Skyline in this program. And overall, it's been going very well. We're having much success meeting the needs. We're serving a lot of kids at Skyline. In the early phases, we had a little bit of difficulty getting parents engaged or keeping parents engaged. After the intake, we do require to meet with them every 90 days to update treatment plans and services. So we faced that challenge, especially in the first year. And then we also had challenges kind of navigating how much time was going to be needed and how successful was it going to be, and giving therapists availability to do more services. But this year, I think we've improved a lot of that with ongoing communication between myself and the liaison and the therapist assigned to the Skyline schools. We've also been able to utilize Zoom due to COVID to help engage parents in ongoing services. And in a rural setting, it's been really helpful to utilize Zoom because we can have possibly the therapist and the child at school, but the parent might be at work, and they're able to do that without having to take off and come to that meeting. So that's been great. Some benefits that we've shown with the program at the school, like I was mentioning, it's less time away from parents from working. Living in the rural communities, a lot of our families live 20 to 30 miles away from the mental health center. Having to take off half a day to come to an hour appointment is a real challenge for our families. It's also less time away from school for the students. Instead of being gone an hour or two, possibly, they're just gone for that 30-minute or an hour and then right back to class. And we're able to pull them at appropriate times, depending on what classes they shouldn't miss or can't miss. We've had very good communication between the school staff and Horizons staff, and ongoing access to crisis services. Again, living in the rural community, that can be a challenge to meet those needs. And so we've been able to increase that by our presence in the school with the kids. Some outcomes since the program started, and Sarah's going to talk next and she'll have more on that, is we've seen a decrease in expulsions and suspensions, increase in attendance and engagement, and increase in school performance. We feel like this is a great fit with us, with Skyline, and our Horizons is also in the program with 7 other school districts in our catchment area. So we're able to offer timely, thorough services, including med management, therapy, community-based, and crisis services. Our staff are acquainted with the rural communities and how to access services because it is more of a challenge and there are less resources at times for us. I did mention utilization of telehealth since COVID has started has made it a little bit easier. We can utilize Zoom to get quicker intakes. We do some intakes at the school, but we're also able to utilize Zoom if the student's at the school and we can get them in quicker with a clinician at the office. We will do that. So we've gotten real creative on how to get them in faster. Skyline has not gone remote during the pandemic, so we haven't had that challenge with us yet. And they've always allowed us and welcomed us and continued to let us come in even during COVID to serve the students. And that was kind of what I had.
All right, thank you very much, Carrie. Next, I have Sarah Lewton with Skyline School District. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Sarah.
Yes. Chairman Landwehr, the committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony to the committee today. As you mentioned, my name is Sarah. I'm the school liaison for Skyline School District. Skyline is just west of Pratt. We cover about 498 square miles that includes 4 rural communities. This is our second year with working in this program with Horizons Mental Health Center. But due to our distance from town and many of our patrons living in the rural communities, our families deal with some unique barriers when trying to obtain access to mental health services for their children. Our families are farmers, ranchers, and many live in town. I would like to share a story about one Skyline family. This past month, we had a single parent family who lives quite away from town. The parent works 2 hourly jobs and has several students that would greatly benefit from our program. This family is struggling with family stress, legal stress, occupational stress, and even financial stress. The parent has scheduled multiple intake appointments for her children. All 3 of these appointments were canceled at the last minute due to various roadblocks. As a school liaison, I was able to work with Horizons Mental Health Center and the parent to find a way to schedule these appointments that could cause the least amount of stress for this parent. She had enough on her plate. Due to the fact that most clinicians have limited flexibility at such short notice within their schedules, the department head of the mental health center offered to conduct the intake appointments at the parent's convenience. Without this program, without a strong relationship between Horizons Mental Health Center and the school, with us speaking frequently and brainstorming with all staff on how we can best serve our families and help them overcome barriers, this family probably wouldn't be in service and their children would continue to struggle at school. The Mental Health Intervention Team Program allows Skyline to provide our high-risk students with services that were once not available. Coordination of care has been key. Relationships have been key. All the staff at Horizons are very responsive to all forms of communication. We're sending emails, we're making phone calls. They are easily reached and offer us any additional support that we need. I would like to share a couple more stories. We had a parent show up at the school for a medication evaluation. She thought she was here for an individual therapy appointment. We were able to call. It wasn't our designated day, so we knew it wasn't a therapy appointment. So we were able to call the front office and problem solve what can we do for this family so that they could have their appointment. We were able to find a location, a private location in the rural school district. Finding space is hard. We were able to find them a location and a computer so that they could have their medication appointment, and this was done by telehealth. Another example is when students miss school on our designated therapy day, we were able to work very closely to help reschedule those appointments. We have a therapist come 1 day a week, and that day is Wednesday. This year, one of our goals was to increase services for high school. Last year, we served a lot in the middle school and elementary school. I forgot to mention earlier that Skyline is pre-K through 12th grade, all on one campus. But this year, we've been able to get into the high school a little bit more. Our best referral source has been the high schoolers themselves. We've been able to break down that stigma of mental health. Lastly, I would like to talk about how the impact of COVID was delayed in our communities. As Skyline was preparing for the school year, we worked closely with the Mental Health Center to make sure the students would stay in place if the important members of that team were unavailable, such as illness or quarantine. A backup plan was addressed even if the identified therapist, Bob, comes to our school. And on Wednesdays, everybody knows it's a Bob day. But we were able to come up with that backup plan if he was out long term. Just starting in November, Skyline began to see the impact of COVID, and we're still starting to feel those ripple effects. Our school has been able to stay open, thankfully. The main stressors our kids and families have been experiencing are multiple quarantines. We have some families that have been quarantined up to 3 to 4 times already. Loss of jobs, financial stress, and unfortunately grief. Again, without the program, without a strong relationship between Horizons Mental Health Center and the schools, Speaking frequently and brainstorming, we would not be able to help our families overcome these barriers and get them the quality support that they need. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much for being with us, and we'll have, as I've said earlier, we'll have questions at the end of the meeting. So next I have up is Walter Hill with the High Plains CMHC. Welcome to committee, Walter.
Madam Chair, committee, thanks for the chance to visit with you on a project we're very proud about and working together with many of our schools. We've been involved in the school mental health projects now. This is our second school year. We started out the first year with 2 districts and 9 school buildings. We 3 school buildings. This year we have 9 districts and 23 buildings. We obviously cover a very large rural and frontier area extending from Hayes out to Representative Smith's area out on the border, and very rural and frontier areas. We have I asked one of my staff just before we started how many school districts we had, and his response was a lot. But I believe we have approximately 40 districts in our area. So we're really glad we have up to about a quarter of them covered with this program so far. It's been, we've seen this year about 170 youth. You know, having a youth with a mental health problem is a real challenge for parents. It's a challenge for schools, it's a challenge for communities. But for a parent, knowing what way to turn, overcoming stigma, trying to navigate the system while you're trying to deal with your kid is often a very foreign experience. And I think that this project has really allowed us to reach out with the schools to parents and grandparents. Grandparents are raising quite a few kids these days, and provide what I call a really smooth on-ramp to get into mental health services. You know, it can be pretty daunting to say your child needs to go to mental health. But what we found is working with the school liaisons like ours here in Hayes, with Jamie Malone, who in fact used to work for us for a number of years. She really takes those parents by the hand, takes those kids by the hand, helps them navigate over to feel safe and comfortable to come into us. We, on the other hand, have reached out into schools, particularly with COVID, using telemedicine to deliver services in many of those sites, and as well as providing on-site services. Something that we have noticed is, as this project has grown, many of the other school districts in our area are very interested in jumping on board, be it through this funding mechanism or finding other funding mechanisms to replicate what has been what they see as very successful in their peer school districts throughout the area. I want to, in my written comments, I provided several stories from families. One just really touched my heart today, a 12-year-old boy being raised by his grandparents. He was aggressive at school. The school liaison helped educate the grandparents about coming in, getting that youth into mental health services. The services were provided on site at the school, and the grandparents were much better able to agree to that. We were able to get the youth referred for some mental health medication services here at High Plains. And the grandmother's comment was, "This is so helpful to our family. We're talking a lot more with the school, and we have a lot better idea of what's going on." This young man has been able to remain living with his grandparents, making progress, and likely, in my estimation, probably would have been placed out of home or in a much more restrictive school setting like our Westside setting. We're just very appreciative of working with all of our school districts and the funding that has come along. I think that the program has great merit, and we find it is effective in a variety of schools with different kinds of population densities in our areas, from Hayes out to some less populous areas. That's a quick summary. Be glad to answer questions at an appropriate time.
Thank you, Walter. I appreciate that. Next, we have Jamie Malone with the Hayes School District. Welcome to committee, Jamie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. I do appreciate the opportunity to share the success of our program with you today. My name is Jamie Malone. I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner. As Mr. Hill said, I worked at High Plains Mental Health Center for a number of years, 26 of those years. So the fit seemed to be really nice when I came to the school district as the middle school liaison. This is our second year here at the middle school at USD 489 Hayes. We did receive funds to be able to expand our program this year in our second year with a full-time second liaison at Hayes High School. It is our hope to be able to further expand our program next year. We'd like to put school liaisons into our elementary school buildings and work that program up, start at the ground level there with the elementary schools and then build up like we've done at the middle school and now the high school. High Plains is our partnering mental health center. We both agree with the mission of the MHIT project that delivering mental health services in partnership with the local community mental health center was truly the best way to go. There are truly not enough resources to duplicate the mental health system inside a school district. So it's a great fit. We have addressed barriers by putting this program in place, and that's what I wanted to speak to today. I know you've heard it referenced a number of times already this afternoon, so I'll be quick here. But there were 4 or 5 barriers that we've addressed. Awareness, competing priorities, transportation, school absences, and communication. We've addressed the awareness issue by literally contacting parents with concerns about their children and saying, look, this is what we're seeing at school, and this is the wonderful program that we have here on site in the school. It's a school-based program. Let us tell you about it. And they've been interested, and they've come in and they've engaged with us to get their children into services here at the middle school and the high school. And I know some of their siblings have even joined services at the mental health center once their middle school child was in services here. But that awareness is something that we have fought with for a number of years. In fact, we used to refer to High Plains being the best kept secret in Northwest Kansas, and we're getting the word out. We also have reduced the barrier to competing priorities. You've heard about parents having work schedules and other responsibilities that they must attend to, and they're not able to pick their child up at school, take them to the mental health center for their mental health services, and then return them to school, or at least in an ideal world, the parents would return the student to the school to finish the rest of the school day. With our on-site school-based services, these competing priorities has not been an issue. And other parents find transportation as or reliable transportation rather, as a barrier to services. We have kids arriving at school each day through carpools and through the busing system, but their parents don't have the reliable transportation to pick them up, again, take them to the mental health center for services throughout the day, and then return them to the school. And we've been able to surmount this barrier of transportation with our on-site school-based services. We have therapy services, which includes individual and family therapy. And we have case management type services provided by recovery specialists as they work with kids in recovering with their services, recovering with their mental illness, rather. We have the therapist available 16 hours a week. And then we have the recovery specialist, case manager type people available all throughout the week. the therapist 2 days per week, I'm sorry, and then the therapist the recovery specialist many days throughout the week. We work with their schedule. And then, so that would be a barrier that we've surmounted too, and that's school absences. We know that kids are going to miss school for a number of different reasons, whether it be doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, family funerals, family illness. Some of that is simply unavoidable. But with the use of the on-site school-based services, kids do not have to leave the building to receive their services. And so they go back to class now. They don't have to come back to school after their appointment. They merely go back to class. And what we have been able to do with my coordinating liaison activities is select which class the child is going to miss for their mental health services. So we do not use math, science, social studies, and language arts classes for mental health services. We simply avoid those. We've taken a strong position that the children, the students need that academic core preparation, and those classes should not be missed. So with the scheduling capabilities and the flexibility of our therapists and recovery specialists, we are able to look at the elective classes to deliver our services. That includes the homeroom class, PE, weightlifting, band, orchestra, vocal, sometimes art, yearbook, communication classes. Those classes in which we are not interrupting their core education are the classes that are used for our mental health services here, delivered by High Plains staff at our 2 schools. We just think that that's the beauty and actually the selling point for many parents as to our scheduling flexibility. They appreciate knowing that their child is not going to be missing science, whereas if they were to make an appointment at the mental health center, it would be at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, or 11 o'clock, and the child would just miss whichever classes occurred during that time. We can use our homeroom from 9:20 to 9:55 for a 30 or 35-minute session, and the child's not missing core academic classes. Communication is a barrier that really was not a problem with High Plains. We have enjoyed a solid collaborative relationship with High Plains for many years. Mr. Hill referred to the Westside School. That is a collaboration between USD 489 and High Plains that's been in existence for almost 25 years, I believe. It's an alternative school where the school district provides its teaching staff and the mental health center provide the mental health services during the school day, throughout the school day. That's an agreement, that's an arrangement that's in place for those kids that are at risk for out-of-home placement. And now with these services in our general education classes, general education schools, then we find that we can meet the needs of those kids before they're at risk for placement at an alternative school. And the communication between our school counselors, the therapists, and staff that come from High Plains and our teachers is exceptional. We're all emailing each other or phoning each other with changes that have occurred throughout the school day. And High Plains has certainly risen to the cause with the COVID-19 pandemic. Immediately, they were providing services by telehealth to our school students. Even during the statewide shutdown, when everybody was at home, High Plains Mental Health Center staff were providing telehealth services to our students, again, arranged by the school liaisons around their elective classes. We're really appreciative of that flexibility. If we find out tomorrow morning the child's going to be quarantined for 10 days and they're scheduled to see the therapist or the case manager, it's just a simple phone call or email to say, they're at home, can you Zoom with them at home? And the answer has always been yes, absolutely. We're Zooming anyway, we'll Zoom from home. So it's that flexibility with High Plains that we really enjoy. We've really reduced the barriers and we appreciate this grant. And we really hope to be able to expand into the coming years. We do appreciate the ease of which the grant application can be completed. And we do appreciate the ease in which the reports are submitted twice a year. We appreciate you really paying attention to that and making that a useful tool for us. I'm available for questions whenever the time is right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Next, I have Keith Rickard with the Guidance Center. Welcome to committee.
Hi, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity today to share what's happening in Leavenworth. The Guidance Center and Leavenworth Public Schools are currently in our second year of a collaborative grant agreement to provide clinical services to the high school, to Leavenworth High School. And we have one full-time clinician presently, and she has served since the beginning of last school year 142 youth and carries a current caseload of 42. And that number is not insignificant. That's a large caseload for any therapist who's based in any location, but especially in the school. I think I'd like to share the program successes. Some of them are very similar to what you've heard from other conferees here today. We are seeing decreased expulsions and suspensions and improved school performance and engagement as a result of our program. We see increased engagement and investment between teachers and students as well. There's because of the mediation efforts of our consultant therapist, it's resulted in teachers becoming increasingly attuned to the student needs and seeking ways to provide support. And students are reaching out and connecting with teachers that they might previously had conflictual relationships, and we see that as a huge win-win. Throughout the school district, there are increased conversations about mental health itself. This program has brought awareness to the adults in the building of the students' challenges and the unique challenges of the Leavenworth community. There's more education on the impact, too, of mental health functioning within schools. We spend a lot of time talking about trauma-informed care and how that affects a student and how that translates to teaching. Teachers and administrators are increasingly curious about alternatives to punishment for what historically has just been identified as bad behavior. We also see increased access to resources because of our mental health therapist, the liaison, and all of the case managers and others working within the Guidance Center. There's greater awareness of what services are available to students. So it's not just us referring them, but administrators and teachers throughout the district are doing the same thing. And this has brought about increased access to mental health care. And you've heard said before, the concept of needing transportation, the time it takes to bring someone from school to a mental health setting is time consuming. It is a barrier, and that's broken down with this specific program. I think, too, that our parents of our kids involved in treatment feel like they have a closer association with their therapist via email or Zoom meetings. So we're not just meeting with the students themselves, but certainly engaging families in that process as well. I think, too, we have, because of our close connection with all of the services here at the Guidance Center, we have a direct link for wraparound services. Our clinician at the high school can identify other needs and can refer them for med management, for case management, psychosocial programming, for our summer program for youth. And so that's an additional benefit of us having someone in the school system. And so just like others have shared anecdotal stories, true stories, I'd like to share one here as well. We've been seeing a student with oppositional defiant disorder who was raised in an abusive environment around substance abuse and other significant traumas in the home. She struggled with fighting with peers, acting out in class, failing classes, substance abuse themselves, and running away, and have regular contact with the police. But since working with the family and the student in therapy, no police contacts have been made since that time. And the family has become more supportive of their family member, and the family is more stable. The client no longer is running away, even though several months ago she suffered the additional insult of being sexually assaulted. But during that time, because she continued in therapy, she now boasts straight A's. While she struggled with that trauma, she also reports feeling stronger and more resilient as a result of her learning new skills of ways to manage her emotions and interactions with other people. So it's really just been a tremendous benefit. Those are the kinds of stories that all of us want to hear when we acknowledge the importance of these kinds of services. Our programs, though, are not without need. Obviously, one clinician in a high school of this size, we clearly could use another clinician. And Leavenworth is just one of about 15 school districts in my catchment area. So we obviously need to expand to other areas, and we're having conversations about ways to do that. But a second barrier, which I think is significant, and I think the legislature needs to understand, is that while the grant pays for 25% of our therapist expenses, the remaining amount was to be collected from third-party payers, including Medicaid and private insurance. And while Medicaid does pay, the private insurance carriers do not pay unless those clinicians have advanced credentials of either LSCSWs, PhDs, or PsyDs. So presently, our therapists can only collect third-party reimbursement from Medicaid and Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas. And indeed, we are a military community, and we have seen a large population of our military family members and students coming to us for therapy. And last year, we wrote off $22,000 of TRICARE charges to this grant. And that's significant. And if the program is going to continue, we're going to have to find ways to cover our cost. The Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas City, Aetna private plans, United Behavioral Health plans, private plans also require those advanced credentials. And I think the success of our program, the oversight that we have of it, proves that those are not necessary credentials for people that we hire. We'd like to hire those people, but there's a dearth of those providers in Kansas, and it's going to continue to be a difficulty. Because of COVID, we did access the Paycheck Protection Program, and we applied some of our therapist costs to the Paycheck Protection Program this last year, collected as much third-party reimbursement as we could, and still asked the school district to compensate us an additional $4,000, or we would have lost money on our school-based program this past year. So it's a great program. It needs to continue, but there are challenges ahead if some of these barriers are not addressed. And with that, I'll discontinue my thoughts, but to be happy to stand for questions later.
Thank you, Keith. Next, I have Kim Knight with the Leavenworth School District.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair and distinguished committee members. I am Kim Knight. I'm one of the assistant principals actually at Leavenworth High School, so I'm a little bit of an oddity from my other school liaisons. But this program has meant the world to all of us. I can tell you that by saying it's a complete change of culture for us is an understatement. We have built from the top down is basically the best way to look at it. We started with education and educating our teachers, educating our administrators on really the impacts of mental health on the educational process, on our students. And it has completely redefined the way that our teachers and everybody in our building responds to kids. I always give an example, and it's kind of silly, but I give the example of a kid that comes to school with a sore tooth. So a kid comes to school with a sore tooth, and realistically, they can't concentrate on school because their tooth hurts. Now, is it the school's job to fix the tooth? Absolutely not. We're not dentists, okay? But what we know is that we can't educate them when they're in that state. And so if we look at them, if we look at mental health issues that our students struggle with, look at it similarly to that. What we realize is that if we can help prevent a child from struggling and being unable to concentrate, if we can provide these services for them, then ultimately we can get much more success out of them at school. So whether that be better attendance, better academic success, all of those are encompassed in that. So, you know, basically we go through our referral process, just like everybody else had mentioned. It's all about reducing those barriers and really simplifying the pathway to treatment for kids. Keith mentioned we have kids that have wraparound care now, have case managers, all kinds of services they have access to now. But one of the big things that we have noticed is this has significantly reduced our suspensions. So like I said, I'm an assistant principal, and I think it was Randy Kallstrom that mentioned that maybe they're not behavior issues and that kind of stuff, but I see the behavior issues. I see them regularly. The kids that just are struggling on a regular basis in the classroom. And so I'll give an example of a kid last year who came to school I have suspended this student numerous times for the same behavior. But the change came last year when I had a clinician in the building to respond. This student struggles with many mental health diagnoses. He came to school in total meltdown one morning, was yelling and screaming at our office staff, was yelling and screaming at me, was cussing at all of us, laid down on the floor and refused to move. Previously, I would have had to shut down my office and remove people and call his mom to come get him and suspend him because it's totally disrupting the school environment at that point. But last year, I went down the hall to Ruby, who is our clinician, and had her come with me. And she sat down on the floor next to him and talked to him for about 5 minutes, got him to stand up, got him to walk down to her office. He was in there for about 45 minutes. Ultimately, got up, was totally fine, went to class, remained the rest of the day, had no other issues that day or the rest of the week. Now, I have seen that student plenty of times since then, and in all honesty, I've not had to suspend him once since we started with Ruby last October. So those are the kinds of little anecdotal stories that really help show that I can keep a kid here at school learning if I can just get them recentered and refocused on the learning process. One other thing that I'll mention as far as that simplified pathway to treatment, we have her here now for a crisis situation. So I know a couple people have mentioned suicidal ideation, but we did have a senior last year who mentioned to a teacher at the end of the day one day, 3 o'clock came, school bell rang. He mentioned to a teacher, hey, I'm kind of struggling, I'm feeling kind of down. Teacher sat down with him, and through our education of the teacher, he understood kind of what questions to start asking to see really what was going on with the kid. He shared that he previously had been the victim of sexual assault and that he was really struggling with it and he hadn't told his parents. After the teacher had talked to him, he expressed that he was there to help him. The student left. The teacher put in a request for the liaison, which was myself, to meet with that student immediately. The next morning at 8 a.m., I called the student in. I talked to him. He revealed that he was struggling with suicidal ideation. I did a very baseline suicide assessment, got him right down the hall to Ruby. She did a full suicide assessment, at which point he was referred to the hospital. What we came to realize was that morning he had stopped at Starbucks and bought a Starbucks coffee for his teacher as a thank you for talking to him, but also as a goodbye present and a thank you because he had already written a suicide letter and had it waiting at home for him to take his own life. So having that immediate impact of somebody who could go straight into services is just beyond priceless. The last thing I'll share with you, because I know time is of the essence, we did reach out directly to our students to ask them how they felt about the program. Because like I said, I have the luxury of working in a high school, and high school students can sometimes be very eloquent in what they say in regards to what they're going through and their feelings about things. So we sent out a very simple survey to those students that had received services from Ruby. And out of those students, 86% of them said that they were more successful in school now because of the services they were receiving. So again, that was 86% said they were more successful. So, and out of all of those, out of all of the students, again, we asked, do you feel that we should continue this program next year? And 100% said, absolutely, we should continue this program. I'll give you just a couple quotes from the students as far as what they said was more successful for them when they referenced being more successful in school. One said, I'm less anxious around people in class. One said, she makes me want to be here and do good on my schoolwork so I can have a better future. But my favorite and the one that honestly touched my heart the most was a kid that said, Miss Ruby has definitely helped me not only to stay in school, but to stay alive. That is the impact this program has had on our students here at Leavenworth. So I am finished with that. I am here for questions as well, but I also want to thank everybody, all the other liaisons and CMHC representatives for doing what you do for kids, because I don't get a chance to say that very often. So thank you.
Kim, thank you very much. And I was hoping that not one of you would bring tears to my eyes, but those stories do. And you know, I don't know what our number is today from the very beginning of this program, but every year we've had the opportunity to save lives. And, you know, wish we could save all of them, but we don't necessarily get to do that. So thank you very much. Committee, are there questions? Representative Lynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my questions are for Craig. I am wondering about the applications to the school districts. Given that many districts have multiple buildings, do they have to apply for each building specifically? Or is the district able to decide which one they want to use?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the district can decide which buildings are going to include in the program. And did I just freeze up?
Well, we can hear you. We just can't see
Okay,
you.
thank you. Yes, I have to turn my video off or I freeze up occasionally. So I
Okay,
apologize for that.
that's fine. You're good.
As long as you can hear me, we're all right. The districts can decide which buildings would be best served in the program, and they apply one time as a district, regardless of how many buildings are included in their application.
If I may, then how do they apply for additional ones? Is that part of the reports that they have to submit?
We take new applications every year. So if they want to add buildings for the following year, that's the best time to do it. Now, I will tell you, particularly in our pilot year, since it was brand new to everybody involved, we did have a couple of districts change buildings over the course of the year. But that was a little different situation. During the pilot year, the legislation actually listed the district and the building. So that took a little extra maneuvering for them to be able to do that.
And Craig, I'm going to tag on to that and correct me if I'm wrong, but the number of school districts and school buildings that we can deal with in this program are subject to the appropriation by the legislature, correct?
That is absolutely correct.
So that's the limitation of the program. Representative Lynn, go ahead.
Thank you. And then I was wondering if we could see maybe one of the completed reports that are submitted so we can see some of the actual data.
Yes, we'll make sure you have that.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Right. Committee, further questions? Is there anyone online? If we don't see you, you need to raise your hands up. Or just tell us you want to speak. Yeah, I think there's several things that make this program really unique, and years ago it came about because in a school building in my district, as I sat down with the social worker, the one thing that the word that kept coming to mind was disconnect, disconnect, disconnect. What does this child do when school's not in place? What does this child do when they have a meltdown on the weekend? What does this child do when they have a meltdown at midnight? Who do they go to? Just having a counselor at a school building isn't enough. It was having 24/7, 365-day access. The other benefit that we've seen in this, as you heard, is the students are starting to remove the stigmatism themselves. I've actually gone and traveled the state to a few of the schools, and it's really interesting when you hear the students are now coming to a teacher or another adult in the school, and it might be, you know, Johnny's sitting in the bathroom and won't come out. Prior to being exposed to this program, would they have noticed that Johnny hadn't come out of the bathroom? Maybe, maybe not. So it's truly been a lifesaver. It gives the services that we need. School districts are only able to bill so much in so many codes in Medicaid. They are not allowed to bill SCHIP, which is our children's program. Kind of ironic, isn't it? And they cannot bill private pay insurance. So by utilizing this program and utilizing our community mental health centers, they are able to bill Medicaid, SCHIP, private insurance, and our community mental health centers, correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, are required, like ERs, to take everyone. You don't get turned away for the lack of pay. Would that be correct, Kyle?
Yes, that's correct. And I might add something. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
Madam
go
Chair.
right ahead.
No, I was going to mention that one of the things that you hit on as well as the stigma piece of it. And it's something that this generation of students gets more than any of the living generations now, and maybe in history. They understand the value of the brain and that it's disorders of the brain that cause some of the behaviors that lead to anxiety, depression, and the other things. And so they talk about this in the same way that folks my age might talk about heart disease or kidney disorders. And I was on a call yesterday with the Zero Reasons Why kids in the Kansas City metro area, and that is an incredible peer-led suicide prevention campaign, which has turned into a mental health awareness campaign. And it's something that I think, as it relates to this program, that has helped community mental health centers and other providers see more school-age kids and recognize the importance of this program. In my testimony, I mentioned also that we were seeing an all-time high in the number of lives ending by suicide in 2017, and our association had actually referred to it as a public mental health crisis. And now, 3 years later, in calendar year 2019, according to state Department of Health and Environment Summary of Vital Statistics, that number in the age group 15 to 24 is down by over 15%, 1.5. So we're not just flattening, we're reducing the number of lives lost. And I think that this program is part of that. But we'll know that data more as time goes by. But that's a significant piece of this program as well.
All right, committee, are there any other questions to this program? I think you'll notice too, Amo, or Representative Berquist, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't mind the names. For any of you, has there ever been a difficulty in, throughout this program, to be able to protect what we would know as HIPAA law protection of the identity of the kid that's involved?
I can answer that. Thank you, committee member. This is Angela Dunn with Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools. That memorandum of understanding that we agree to at the beginning of this certainly helps with that. So having that agreement between the school district and the community mental health center to be able to talk about concerns, particularly when it pertains to safety, has been really important because it cuts down that lag time that we might have originally seen in getting students into services. So we can talk about that and talk freely in regards to the concerns and the safeties of the student.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, Madam Chair.
You bet. Well, and one of the things that was decided early on in order to address issues, especially, like in my area of Wichita, where kids are so much more mobile, so they may be on the east side, the west side, they change schools, is that the children are supposed to be identified by their school ID number. So that helps create some consistency in things. Did you have a question? No. But I just, a lot of people have a misunderstanding as to why the CMHCs were chosen for it, and it wasn't only the fact that they have the ability to cover the majority of the state, but they cannot refuse anyone for payment. It's also been a great asset, and this was touched on a little bit in conversation, is the true wraparound services for family members. And this became, an not thought about benefit when we started this, was how important it is in a small town where everybody knows everybody's business. How nice it was for a parent to be able to go to a school building and get mental health services if they needed help. And sometimes it's not about mental health services. Maybe the student is struggling because mom and dad are struggling financially, whether it's with groceries, with a job, etc. Then the CMHC counselor is able to connect them with other, different benefits, different organizations to kind of help them out. And a lot of times then you remove the stresses and the issues that the student is having in school. So and this is just a tip of the iceberg. And I mean, it just gives me chills and goosebumps every time when I hear these stories. But the work that we're doing and the lives that we're saving on kids and the lives that we're improving, and that database is an online database. So they can always see what the benefits are of the student. And there is a lot of details in it, and you won't get as, probably Representing Lynn, as much detail as you're looking for just because of confidentiality issues. But it's a good benchmark because people say, well, you can't just grade them, you'll monitor them on their grades. Well, no, we don't monitor them just on their grades. There's a whole lot of things, because if a child has less disruptions every day in a classroom, that's a success. That's a big deal. Or less tardies, less absenteeisms. What was one of the other ones I was thinking about? Well, yeah, and this was touched on that one of you mentioned is, a lot of times a student would go to a counselor meeting away from school and then not come back because it's like, oh, I only got another 2 hours for the day. Well, now they're receiving those services there at the school. So it keeps them in the classrooms a lot more. Are there any further questions, committee? Can you tell I get a little bit excited about this program? All right, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here with us today and taking time out of your very busy schedules. And, just keep doing the good work with the children. And I know there's a lady that's out there listening right now that is kind of a liaison for each of you that goes around and helps solve things, so I won't embarrass her. But I appreciate everything that she does, and I know that Craig's got some big shoes to fill with Dale Dennis, because Dale was a part of the very beginning of this and to help us with the success. And there was actually a group of bipartisan legislators that sat down and helped design this. So I want to thank each and every one of them and all of you for the work that you do. So thank you. All right, committee, that will end our business today. Keep a heads up. We're dealing with a situation where LAS cannot seem to find anyone that can do anything but answer a telephone in my office. So I'm trying to do the agendas and get the testimonies and send them all out. So we're making it happen. We did get our first set of bills back to us today, so there will be hearings if I can get those set up next week. So if you'll just bear with me, if you have questions, call Representative Epley because he still has someone. I guess I have someone answers the phone someday, but perhaps LAS will find someone that can do more than answer a phone. We're adjourned.